Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your time this morning. My name is Michael Lenham. I am the Checkpoint vendor manager here at Bytes. I've worked with Checkpoint for a number of years and worked with Bytes for a number of years. I am responsible for essentially all things Checkpoint at Bytes. So I am going to kick off with a few slides around some observations, a little bit of history about Bytes and Checkpoint, a bit of information around what we can offer around Checkpoint from a licensing commercial standpoint. And then I'm going to hand over to Jay Patel to dive into the nuts and bolts of the showcase today. So thank you again for your time. I'll kick right off. So just a little bit about the history of Bytes and Checkpoint. I appreciate some of you may have been working with us for a number of years and will know a fair amount of this already. Bytes have been a Checkpoint partner since 1999, so for over 2 decades now, and we're very proud of that. Our SPARC CCSP desk has been in operation since 2005. I hope that that's a service you all know well and hopefully have used in the past. Jay will come on to some bits and pieces later on around some features that we've implemented on SPARC. We have a new feedback feature, which is excellent. The feedback's been great so far. So very proud of SPARC and what it does for us here at Bytes and the service it offers to our customers. There's a few things in here around, awards and bits and pieces that we've won over the years. Again, something we're proud of. Certainly last year, we were quite fortunate winning Infinity Partner of the Year, Cloud Partner of the Year. We're hoping for Partner of the Year this year, but we'll see early next year. But the message here is Bytes have worked with Checkpoint for a long time. Our business has grown in tandem with theirs, and it's one of our strongest security vendors internally. So just some observations from the bridge, as it were, around what we've seen from Checkpoint over the last couple of years. Apologies, you may be aware of some of this already, but we've noticed there's a large number of customers that have not been kept up to date by Checkpoint in terms of acquisitions they've made, new features that are available and whatnot. So just a couple of bits around this. So 2021, Checkpoint acquired a company called Avanan for around 300 million. What we hear is that there were a number of companies that were trying to acquire Avanan, a lot of the large email traditional SEG vendors. I'm sure the guys at Avanan were probably rubbing their hands together. There was a lot of people after them. Checkpoint did acquire them, and it's been one of the fastest growing areas of Checkpoint we've noticed over the last 12, 24 months. It's not Checkpoint's historical kind of pedigree, as it were, but it's a very interesting technology, and we've certainly seen a lot of interest from our customers. Part of the reason for that is the patented technology that they have within this product, which enables it to sit in line with Microsoft. So it complements any Microsoft deployment very well, and just enhances that. Certainly one of the fastest growing areas of Checkpoint at the moment. The Harmony number that it sits within is grown by about 150% this year. And I think that's largely in part to this technology. As I say, it complements the Microsoft Defender very well. Easy to deploy as well. We see it deployed with a number of our customers. It takes 30 minutes or less. It's a case of just pointing MX records to the technology and letting it kind of run away and set itself up using machine learning, AI, and all the other buzzwords that you would have heard. Something to note is that if this isn't an area you're familiar with from the Checkpoint side of things, there is a free email health check available. We've noticed there's a lot of customers that have upcoming email projects or perhaps a renewal with another vendor that's coming up in 6 to 12 months. They're looking to review the market. Certainly, if you have a Checkpoint deployment in place at the moment, chances are that's probably not with the Harmony email and collaboration product, which is now what Avanan is referred to as. Again, that free email health check is available, easy to set up. Let us know if that's something you're interested in. We have some materials around that we can pass over. It's very easy to do and very quickly demonstrates ROI for a lot of the customers that have gone ahead and done that. Something a bit more recent that only happening this year is the acquisition of Perimeter 81, essentially to kind of bolster the Checkpoint SASE offering. A lot of you may be familiar with Harmony Connect, maybe have it deployed or have undertaken a POC or something along those lines. Harmony Connect, it did serve a purpose. There's some customers that did deploy it very well, and it ticked all the boxes for them. What we did notice as Bytes is that there were some limitations with that technology, and I think that's down in part to kind of Checkpoint building that themselves or attempting to build them themselves from the ground up. We faced some issues with large global customers, but with the acquisition of Perimeter 81, it looks like a lot of those hurdles have been overcome. There's certainly a much larger number of POPs around the world which can support global customers. There's also a private backbone. I believe the Harmony Connect was a public backbone only using AWS. Perimeter 81 now has a private backbone which will support and complement the existing offering. Harmony Connect is actually due to be superseded, so we've been told all existing customers will be migrated. That's obviously not something you're being expected to kind of pay for, but Harmony Connect will essentially cease to function as a product from the end of this year, I believe, and will be replaced by Quantum SASE, as Checkpoint are calling it. Which, I mean, it's very early days, but the feedback that we've had from the technical side of the business is that the initial feedback is very positive, and it's certainly a stronger offering than Harmony Connect was. Again, trials or proof of concepts are available on request. The full integration of Perimeter 81 as a company into Checkpoint is being undertaken as we speak. Realistically, you're probably looking at 6 months until that's fully done. There are plans for all the management of this product to be built into the Infinity management platform, as you would expect, as with all our Checkpoint products. So that is, again, being worked on as we speak. So we hope within the next 6 months or so that this will really bolster the SASE offering from Checkpoint and present a stronger offering to the market. Something from the internal Byte side here regarding Checkpoint is we've officially launched, or I guess formalized, a service that we have actually offered and kind of done ad hoc for a number of years now, which is a user center license review, or ULR, as we're calling it. It sounds quite formal, but as I say, it's something we've done for a long time. Essentially, all this is taking a look at your user center or user centers, having a look through those, reviewing that with you. Essentially, what this does is identify legacy or outdated products or licenses, presents opportunities for consolidation, end-of-life hardware, of course, and general best practices around user centers. We noticed that with some customers, you make purchases over many years, and that can lead to a bit of a disjointed user center, multiple renewal dates, multiple user centers sometimes where there's no real desire for that. So this is a very easy process to undertake and completely free of charge, of course. What we have noticed is that customers benefit from this very quickly, and we don't recommend only doing this around renewal period. The recommendation is to do this probably once every 6 months, if not maybe more frequently. Certainly as you take on new products, as I say, it's very quick for a user center to get a little bit disjointed. Again, some customers have benefited from large cost optimization just through running through a user center and just identifying what is or isn't being used, and that applies to licenses. So, subscription types that you're running as well. We've certainly had a lot of new Checkpoint customers to Bytes realize that they've been paying for things that they haven't been using for some time. So if this is something you haven't done in a while, with Bytes or with another partner, this is absolutely something we would recommend. It's very easy to do. All we require is your user center numbers or number, if it's just the one. Give us 48 hours or so, and we'll come back to you with a report with a number of observations and recommendations off the back of that. Again, flyers on this are available, and we can get those sent out following from the call today. And just reach out to your Bytes account manager if that's something you'd be interested in doing. So just to cover a few of the other health checks that we run here. So the email one, which I mentioned earlier, which essentially uses the Avanan product in a very low touch investigative mode. It's very non-intrusive. Take a look at what traffic is coming through your current email gateway and identifies what's been missed. The user center license review, as I've just mentioned, very quickly demonstrates ROI on that. Very useful to do if you haven't done one in a while. Also the cloud security snapshot, which uses Checkpoint's CloudGuard or Dome 9 product, as it was previously known. Anybody with a private or public cloud infrastructure deployment, we would recommend undertaking this cloud security snapshot. Can very quickly identify policy misconfigurations or potential exposure, which you may not be aware of. Again, very easy to run, very easy to do. Just reach out to your Bytes account manager if that's something you'd be interested in. What's not mentioned on this page is the firewall health check. So for existing Checkpoint firewall customers, this is something we can undertake. Take a look at your policies on your firewalls, again, configurations, recommendations, things like that. If that's something you've not done in a while, certainly those people with larger firewall estates, we'd absolutely recommend undertaking a firewall health check as well. Just a couple of points about our SPARC service. Again, the majority of you may be very familiar with this, but just a few points around kind of why it differs from other CCSP services out there in the market. So it's a direct to third line engineer service. We don't operate a first and second line here with the SPARC desk. Whenever you pick up the phone or register a ticket via email, your first point of contact is a third line engineer, always. And we find that it's of massive benefit to our customers. We've got over 10 of those engineers, and roughly 85% of tickets that are raised to Bytes we solve in-house. We only escalate onto Checkpoint, if it's typically an R&D related issue. If it's an actual software problem that we cannot fix ourselves internally, we will then escalate onto Checkpoint. So only about 15% of that. And about a quarter of all tickets raised to us are solved on the first call. And again, I think that speaks to the efficiency of speaking to a third line engineer immediately instead of having to jump over those first and second line hurdles. Again, it works. We don't limit the amount of tickets our customers can raise onto us. We think limiting the amount of tickets kind of encourages the wrong behavior potentially. If you have a technical problem with your Checkpoint kit, you should absolutely be speaking to either us as your CCSP, or if you have direct Checkpoint support, you should be speaking to somebody about that. We don't believe in limiting the amount of tickets that you can raise. Our team also have a direct line into Checkpoint's R&D, as I mentioned. So that's as far as kind of Teams chats with the guys over in Israel, which is, we're quite fortunate to have. There aren't many partners out there in the market that have that direct line. And again, the intention behind that is just resolving software-related issues as quickly as possible for our customers. Our team is one of the highest accredited in the UK. Again, our number of engineers and the level that they are accredited to is very high. And we do offer, if you aren't an existing SPARC customer with us, if you have direct Checkpoint support, or if you have support with another CCSP provider, we do offer a kind of a try before you buy. So if you have an existing open ticket that is causing you substantial headaches, we encourage you to reach out to us and let us have a go at solving that for you. We do have a flyer, again, which just requires a small amount of information that you can fill in and send back to us, and we can open a ticket with our SPARC desk and see if we can get that resolved for you. So any particularly problematic tickets, do give us a shout if you're not an existing SPARC customer, and give the team a go, essentially. Thank you. That was all from me. I'm going to hand over to Jay Patel. What I will say is any questions throughout the showcase today, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will get round to them, even if it's answering them at the end. So please pop those in. And I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Jay.
Good morning, all. This is Jay Patel. I head up the technical solutions team here at Bytes, so responsible for professional services across our core security vendors, Checkpoint being one of them. And I also look after SPARC and our Microsoft Azure and M365 professional services teams as well. I've been dabbling with Checkpoint 17, 18 years, showing my age now. But I've been in the capacity of SPARC support engineer, consultant, and these days I head up services. So for those who've been to these sessions before, you know what to expect. This is effectively us giving our view on all good things Checkpoint. We'll also talk about what we feel that you should do on a day-to-day basis in terms of, from a support perspective, managing your estate. In fact, the first half of this session is suggestions from our SPARC support team, where we'll talk about what they see customers struggling with, and some of the things that they wanted me to bring to this session. So there's a fair amount we need to go through, so I'm going to get straight into it. But before we get into the interesting stuff, I would like to draw everyone's attention to the the less interesting but equally important stuff, which is the end of support information. So hopefully no one here is on 80/40 because it goes out to support in a couple of months' time. If you are one of them, then please start planning your upgrades as soon as. The current default version that's widely recommended by Checkpoint and even ourselves is 8120 take 631. All installed and upgrades that we perform from our professional services team are on this version. Moving on to appliances, 2012 appliances. You're wondering why I've got these on here, but we still have, scarily, some customers still on these appliances. So if you're on them, please move off of them. They went end of support last year in June. And if you're on the 2016 appliances, these go end of engineering support next month. So again, if you are on any of these appliances, then please start planning your upgrades. Obviously, this is end of engineering support. This is an end of support. End of support is December 25. But what end of engineering support means is any software version that's released after December 2023 will not be supported on these appliances. Okay. Obviously, there's far too many software builds, endpoints, hardware for me to cover in this session. So please do ensure that you are checking the support dates against this URL, or even better, discuss this with your account manager, and if need be, they can loop one of our consultants to provide our recommendation. Okay, so boring stuff out of the way. Going to start talking about, like I said, stuff that my SPARC team wants to talk about. Now, SPARC, like I said, they're at the core phase of helping our customers with their support issues. So what I'm going to talk about next, so you can see the first one here is NTP, and there's a few others, is stuff that they wanted me to cover off today. And quite frankly, when NTP came up, I thought, you're having a laugh. Surely people are not still struggling with NTP. You know, this is in 2003. But it seems that we are still seeing loads of issues from customers where NTP is not configured and it causes problems. So for those who work with firewalls long enough will know if time drift, things like VPNs, two-factor authentications, timestamps on logs are out of sync. So if you're troubleshooting traffic flows across multiple firewalls, but the time's not synced, it's an absolute nightmare to try and identify where the problem is because none of the timestamps match. And lately, what we're finding is SAML authentication, which more and more customers seem to be adopting with, you know, remote access VPNs. There's another feature I'm going to talk about in the second half of the session, which is Smart Console authentication. It's now also supported with SAML, so you can get single sign-on. But if NTP isn't configured, then none of that works properly. So first thing to remember with NTP is the time fetched from the NTP server is in UTC, right? So you have to make sure that you select the correct time zone. And the way to do that, and this is where I'll switch across to my VM. So, and to do that, what you need to make sure is, if I go across to Gaia and find time. So you need to make sure the time zone is set correct. That's literally the first thing you want to do. And, you know, the Gaia portal is quite user-friendly, so it's better to do that. But if you don't set the time zone properly, Gaia systems will not synchronize correctly or synchronize to the wrong time. So you'll still end up having the same problem. So you've configured NTP, but how do you know it's actually working and syncing time correctly? Well, first and foremost, what you can do is just check through the Gaia portal here. Now, usually it will just say it's working. If there aren't any problems, it won't show you any errors here. But being techies, we tend to find that running CLI at the gateway or the management server is much easier. So best way to check this is run the ntpq command. And in here, if you type peers, this will tell you which NTP servers it's syncing with, along with the summary of each server state. The stuff you need to look at is the ST, which is stratum and reach. Provided stratum is not 16, is less than 16, then everything's fine. Reach 377, this is the magic number. What this means is, so it's a bit weird to explain reach. I don't think I can do that in this session, but really quick overview is reach is effectively an 8-bit shift register displayed in an octal format. So 377 actually means 3 is 011, 7 is 0111, and then another 7 is 0111. So you put 3, 3, and 2. So the last 8 tries to reach that NTP server has been successful. So it didn't miss a single NTP sync. That's what that number means. So if it's 376, it probably missed 1, but you have to kind of convert that number, whatever you find in reach, into an octal representation, and then you find out how many it missed. But anyway, so that's what the SPARC guys tend to use to get a really clear idea of how healthy the state of the NTP server is. Another easy way to check this is NTP stats, and that just gives you a really friendly way to just say, yes, synchronized at stratum 5 and time is corrected within X amount of stuff. If NTP isn't working, then what do you check? First and foremost, you want to make sure that it is configured in Glacier Gaia. You want to make sure that the remote NTP server is actually up and running. Check that the NTP service is running on Gaia. So it's service NTPD status. There you go. So service is definitely running. Make sure the devices that you configure the NTP on actually have a route to what the where the NTP server is. And finally, make sure that the security policy actually allows the NTP traffic. So really trivial thing, you know, like I said, I was quite surprised when the guys even raised this with me, that they want to bring this up on this for this event. But it seems like there's still far too many customers where NTP isn't configured, and then have lots of problems, and they try and go down a rabbit hole trying to fix things or identify what the problem is, and then they find out, like, yeah, it was just NTP. So that's the first one they wanted me to raise. The second thing they wanted me to talk about is a tool called Health Checkpoint, which is a collection of tools that gives you basically lots of different tests against your checkpoint device. Health Checkpoint doesn't quite roll off your tongue really easily, so I'll stick to HCP. So before I start talking about this, I'm just going to show you how to run it on the Gateman, then we'll keep talking about this. So it's HCP -R, which is run, and we're going to run all tests. And I'm going to include WTS, which is what's the story. Do that. Go no -R, or sorry, missed out a hyphen. There you go. So whilst that's doing that, so basically, like I said, it's a collection of tools that runs health tests against your checkpoint device and provides you with insight into the health of your device and flag any possible issues that might not seem obvious through the smart console or just looking through the logs. And it presents it, you will see in a bit, in a easy to read format, even through the CLI. It is installed automatically on all relevant checkpoint devices if you allow automatic updates, and I'll talk about this in a bit. And it self-updates as well, okay? So if I go back to my slide deck, so it's, as I say, it's available on Quantum Gateways, Maestro, VSX management servers. It's not available on the SMB devices, but there's something similar on the SMB devices, and it's called .SPARC. I won't go into that one. It's not as detailed as HCP, but it does do the job around the SMB devices. So if you head back here, you could see it's done, it's finished running, and it can tell you how to view the full report on this machine, which is HCP-show last full. Which, if I run that, you'll see --show last full. I'm just going to pipe this. Right, so you can see the report. Now, the information's there, but obviously it's not the most easily readable. So what you can do is you can extract, you can copy that file, which by the way is in cdvar log. You don't have to remember this, by the way. If you run that command and it finishes it, it does tell you where that the path of that file is. So varlog hcp last, I believe, and in here you'll see that tar.gz file. So you basically use WinSCP to move the file off the box. I already have one extracted here to save time. You can see there, you extract that file and there'll be the index.html. So much more easy to view that information. So let's look at the output. So 4 key bits of information here. Got tests, what's the story, charts, topology. Tests, these are a series of tests that scan the system and provide you effectively, as you can see, a comprehensive report of your system. And for each test, it provides a verdict. So whether it's a success, error, warning, and for tests that failed, it shows their findings, and it also suggests next step action, which is really useful. So if I take, for example, system, general, and zombie processes, you can see it found one process in a defunct state. That's the name of that process, and it even tells you what you should do, which is right, submit a service request to Checkpoint. If I pick another one, so if I pick performance, general, and maybe CPU spikes somewhere, I think I saw, there you go, CPU spikes. And it will tell you here, I scroll down, total of 4 CPU spikes reported in the system in the last 3 hours. Go and review this SK, right? Now, obviously, this is a lab box with just a single VM behind it. So, this is going to be fairly light. But I'm pretty certain if you run this on your estate, it will probably light up like a Christmas tree. And there will be a fair amount of stuff that you might want to look at just to optimize things. What's the story is really interesting. So what this does is it arranges critical and information events of several processes and services into a single timeline. So it helps visualize what happened when in a bird's eye view. And this, when you run this, it does go back to about 2 weeks. So really helpful when you're troubleshooting issues that affected the system but no longer exist. So, doing a root cause analysis or an RCA type situation. Charts, if you've got charts for your memory, hard drive, Checkpoint processes, you can even zoom in to stuff. As you can see, I'm just literally scrolling my mouse cursor there. You can narrow in or zero in to specific timelines, and it zooms in, which is really handy, especially when you're looking at traffic spikes or outages that happen at specific timeframes. And lastly, you have topology. So just helps you visualize the file topology of the network. Really helpful if you've got a complex VSX environment. On 8110, let me go back to my slide. If you're on 8110 Jumper Hotfix 95, the HCP report is now available in Web UI. So what that means is if you just go to your IP of your gateway /HCP, log in, and okay, I'm in. There you go, and this is where it will pull. You can see it's today's date. It will pull the last report automatically. Right. So that's much better in terms of rather than copying that file across. It's just available provided you're on that Jumbo hotfix and above. If you are on 8120, you can even add the HCP extension to your smart console, which is really handy. And to do that, by the way, you copy that line. By the way, don't worry about screen grabs or anything. We will be sending these slides across, so you can, have a look at this leisurely in your own time. But basically, you copy that URL, which is HTTPS IP of your management server, NGM management at hcpextension.json, and you add it to, so if I go to management settings, and I believe preferences, yeah, preferences, smart console extension. So you can see I've already added it here. And what happens is if you go to gateways and servers, if you've got multiple gateways, select the gateway that you want to pull the HCP report, and you will get this option here, health check, if you've added that smart console extension. So if I click that, it will pull the last one that it did. I ran, you can see yesterday afternoon. I then have the ability to also fetch the latest report, which we've just run off the gateway. We can, by the way, pick off a HCP check through the smart console as well. So all you do is just say fetch live report, and it will go and run that on that gateway or management server, and it will pull and display the report here. So really useful feature, especially if you guys, assuming most of you have got a SPARC contract and you've got guys to lean on. But if you're comfortable doing initial level of troubleshooting, or you're just curious about why something's not happening on your gateways, then really handy to run this if you suspect some challenges with that deployment. Now, I briefly mentioned about automatic downloads, right? That HCP is automatically downloaded if you have automatic downloads turned on. But if you don't, you're missing out on this tool and lots of other features that Checkpoint regularly roll out. So you normally have this option to enable or disable automatic downloads when you are installing your gateway on your management server and you're going through the first time configuration visit. If you don't use this setting, there's an impact both operationally and usability, I suppose. So things like it disables automatic downloads. If I move across to, close that. I'm already in my smart console. So things like, checking what updates are available, downloading those updates, telling you what the recommended jumbo is, checking the blades and licensing features, all of this stuff, IPS updates from the user center fails, web smart console functionality, which is the other thing I'll talk about later on. That is released gradually. That also gets updated automatically. That won't get updated. Trusted certificate authority list, that doesn't get updated. No updates to the messages and actions section. If you move across to security policy and autonomous policy, you get kind of the news, what's new stuff here. A lot of this stuff doesn't work if you haven't got that enabled. So our recommendation from SPARC and even Checkpoint is to make sure that it's enabled across your estate. And because it's a global change, so you go to menu, global properties, and I'm on 8120. 8120, it's called data access control. So just go and check that these boxes here are enabled. If they aren't, then like I said, it won't automatically download and install break contracts, security updates, any important data, which, for example, things like HCP, Web Smart Console, things like that won't be downloaded or updated. Whilst I'm here, I'm also briefly going to mention another one, which is sync with user center. And this is found in managing settings, sync with user center. This is really interesting. So what this does, by the way, if you enable this, this will update the user center with your information it pulled from within your estate. So things like, I think I have the SK here, that one there. So if you log onto your user center, you will be able to see your gateways, devices, and it will populate this with what was the last, what blades are actually enabled, what's the version running on those gateways, what's the name of that gateway. You know, it just basically, it just allows with better inventory management. Okay, so those two settings, bear in mind, go and have a look within your estate to see if they're enabled. If they're not, definitely recommend enabling them. Okay, so moving on. So this one is really important for anyone who uses identity awareness. So 2021 CV came out, which is on screen here. Microsoft released hardening changes that enforced a high level of authentication for DCOM traffic, which meant if you were using AD query for a DC user who is not an administrator, then AD query wouldn't be able to access the DC. As of March 2023, these hardening changes are enabled by default in terms of from the Microsoft update perspective, without the ability to disable them. And they do interfere with the Checkpoint AD query operation, where it's configured as an identity source, as well as environments where identity logging is enabled. For those unfamiliar with how they work, you know, they query Microsoft Active Directory security event logs, and they extract user and computer information. It maps it to an IP address. Checkpoint released fix for AD query and identity logging to work with these new hardening changes. The list is on screen there. You know, different versions, 8110 and 8040. I don't think anyone I know of is on 81, because I think people just pass that one, but it's there if you are one of those still on 81. However, whilst the jumper hotfix is available to make sure that identity logging carries on working with those hardening changes, Checkpoint's recommendation is to move away from AD query and start using identity collector as an identity source, because it only requires the event log reader privileges. You know, some of the drawbacks of AD query were by default, it requires domain admin credentials for connecting to AD, which isn't ideal, but most organizations won't give AD domain credentials. They use a read-only account, and then we have this problem. I've also seen over the years customers a bit lax, and they don't use LDAP-S, and they just use standard LDAP, which means those credentials, whether they're domain admin or not domain admin, but they are sent in clear. So again, not ideal. Identity collector, on the other hand, only requires, like I said, log reader privileges. So it does this. So it reads. Sorry, it learns the login events by subscribing to the Windows Event Log API, and it then forwards these events to the PDP engine on the gateway. So yeah, I mean, literally, main difference is identity collector adheres to least privilege security best practice. You install it. By the way, it's a tiny agent. I have my lab DC here. That's what the identity collector looks like. You install it on a Windows machine. It doesn't need to be part of the domain. And what you do is you install it, you go to domains, you add your domain, provide your IP of your DC, test it, it pulls the domain back, and then you go to identity sources, which is here, and you create a new Active Directory, add manually, which is the one I've got here. And once you do that, you provide the IP of your AD, test it, and it will pull back all of the different DCs. You create what's called a query pool, and this is where you create, what tree structure you actually want to pull back. Do that. Once you do this, login events will start gathering into the identity collector. Now, obviously, at this point, you've installed the identity collector, which is kind of an application, hooked it up with your domain controller, it pulls information, it registers to start learning about the login events, and it starts gathering that information. But we haven't yet done anything from the identity collector to the gateway. So what you then do is you go to your Smart Console, you create a host object with the IP of your identity collector, and in your gateway where you've configured identity awareness, I haven't enabled AD query because I'm only using browser-based authentication, but you would select identity collector, go to settings, and add, for example, the lab identity collector. It creates a shared client secret. Once you go out, it won't be visible, so make sure you copy this. And then you head back to your identity collector on your gateways. You create your gateway object and you provide it with the shared secret, okay? And at that point, that gateway will learn all of those identities from the identity collector. If you are already using AD query and you do what I've just explained, you will have effectively two sources. If you log onto your gateway and you run pdbm command, you should see it seeing identity mapping both from AD query and identity collector, and then have kind of a downtime window, and then disable AD query and make sure the gateway is still seeing the identities through identity collector. If you have multiple sites using AD query, then it gets a bit complex in terms of not something that I can cover off in these short sessions, but that's when you need to start looking at something called an identity broker, which kind of acts as a broker between multiple identity collectors or multiple sites. But basically, that's when you need to get some of our professional services guys involved to help you guys set that up. But the key point here is if you are still using AD query, then start moving to identity collector. If you feel you're comfortable with doing something like this yourself, that SK 179544 has some really good detailed guidelines on how to move to an identity collector. It's videos, detailed articles, everything. Okay. So that's identity collector. Moving on to IKE certificate default validity period. So the standard validity period decreased from 5 years to 1 year by default. This means that a certificate is valid for 1 year, both in creation and renewal. Okay, this change came into effect from the versions that I've stated on the screen, 8110 onwards. So if you're on 8120, it would still be basically IKE certificates would be 1 year onwards. Why are Checkpoint making this change? Simply because a shorter validity period mitigates security risks when a private key is compromised. So this aligns Checkpoint products with industry security standards in the certificate authority industry. To check the validity period of the certs generated by your management server, really simple. So I think the command was there on that screen, but I've got it here as well, which is this one. So I run that on my management server, which is this one here. This will list every single cert that's been generated by the management server. Now, because this is a brand new 8120 management server and an 8120 gateway, it only has the current cert, which is valid for just 1 year, as you can see. Okay, so if you've upgraded your management server recently, and with your gateways as well, they might still be on the old 5-year validity period, but when your VPN cert comes up for renewal and you renew it, remember it's only 1 year. Now, you can, not recommended, but you can extend that default validity period from 1 year to 3 years. And that is by running this command here. So CPCA client set cert validity -k IKE -y3. When you do that, it will extend all default certs that are produced after running that report to 3 years. Okay, so run that command and then go and renew every single one of your gateway's VPN certs. Make sure you do this in a maintenance window, because it will, there is a risk of outages to VPN tunnels. In terms of the actual expiry for VPN certificates, bear in mind you get notified when, I think I have, there you go. So that's the kind of alerts that you get. Obviously, in this instance, this is an expired cert from my lab, but it starts 60 days before the certificate expires, and it starts with a warning. Now, what we've seen is where customers get into a habit. So, you know, sometimes you have like overlapping rules or certain services or applications with the same name or the same port, and you get those warning messages when you're pushing policy and you just keep ignoring it. Just be careful, not get into a habit of ignoring warning messages. When you get a warning, just do read that, because that warning starts 60 days before the certificate's going to expire. And at 14 days, it turns from a warning to an error message. So if you just need to make sure that you've renewed it well in advance. Renewing it is really simple. So you just go to find the gateway, IPsec VPN, select the certificate, make sure you view it, confirm that it's definitely it's going to expire in the next 60 days, and just hit renew. Okay. There, unfortunately, isn't at this time a way to do a bulk certificate renew in some form of an automated fashion. Checkpoint are working on that, but there isn't any solid ETAs that I can share with you guys. So at the moment, it's still a manual process, which is why please either run that command that I shared earlier, and find out when those certificates are going to expire, and then keep an eye on when you're pushing your policies on your warnings and your alerts, which will usually be on the bottom left corner here. Okay. Lastly, things that the guys asked me to cover off is the internal CA certificate. So long-time Checkpoint customers are starting to hit the 20-year ICA expiry date. The ICA certificate is valid for 20 years. Up until recently, the renewal process did not even occur automatically, which is a bit scary. In fact, to ensure that you received an alert to inform that the ICA is about to expire, you had to be on one of these versions. So 8110 jumper hotfix stake 75 and over, and 8040 jumper hotfix stake 172 and over. But even if you're on those versions, the renewal process does not occur automatically. Okay, so please be mindful of that. It only occurs automatically from take 95 on 8110 and take 198 on 8040. So if you haven't, please run this really long command on your management server, which I'm just going to show you quickly what the output looks like. So if I copy that, and head to my management server. So that tells you that expires on the 19th of Jan, 2038. Okay, so please do run that command. Any certificates that were generated by the ICA before the automatic renewal will still have the expiry date of the renewal date of the ICA. So there's two main certificates that are signed by the ICA. Your 6th certificate on the gateways, these are auto-renewed, so nothing for you to do there. VPN certificates, these will need to be renewed. We've already talked about that earlier. To prevent SIG issues, our recommendation is to renew the internal TA certificate at least 2 weeks before the expiration date. Okay. Obviously, bear in mind when you renew the ICA certificate, the fingerprint is changed. The expected behavior is that remote access clients will be asked to trust the new fingerprint of the internal TA certificate. So you can either send an advance notice to those users of that behavior and just say, this is what will happen when you connect next time. You will need to click on trust and continue. Unfortunately, you cannot provide them with what that fingerprint is going to change to before you've actually renewed the certificate, right? So if you have a mechanism of pushing that fingerprint to the users without them being on the VPN, then you can do that. And the way to do that is if I go across to servers, trusted TA, internal TA, and go here. So once you've renewed it, you will see, click on view, and you get that there is the fingerprint, okay? I have mentioned this in my slide deck, which is that's the Windows registry path where you need to bung that in. If I, in fact, show you on my laptop. So that's that path there, same path. You will find your gateways folder there. And in here, that's the fingerprint there. So if you can find a way to update that using GPO, SCCM, PowerShell script, after you've renewed the ICA, then the users won't get notified when they connect next to the remote access VPN. Okay, and that's all I wanted to cover off in this first half of the session.
Before we resume,
yep.
Would you let me know when is a convenient time to share some of the questions we got in the chat?
Do we have plenty? Couple?
No, just a couple.
Okay, let's go through them.
Wonderful. So the first question is more of an observation in terms of the ender support for R80.40.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Checkpoint website now says that this has been extended to April 2024 as opposed to January. It's marked in red. Yeah,
the reason I say that cheeky is literally last week it was still.
Yep.
So I probably should have done my due diligence and checked it this morning as well.
Yeah.
But yes.
You can see how that's obvious.
Yeah, so apologies in that case for that misinformation. No. But yeah, last week that was still what I shared earlier. But yeah, so it's not next month now, it's 4 months, 5 months.
Exactly. Well, we can all have a safe Christmas while we plan our grade. So thank you to Ben for raising this. Well done.
Cheers, Ben.
Yeah, there was then a question around NTP and times on setting, which I think I've shared the answer to. And then the last one is basically you shared something about the AD query versus the new component. So Lee would like to know whether a date has been mentioned for when this become an issue, or what's the best practice?
Not really. So basically, if I go back to identity collector, so basically there was, if you were using AD query with a non domain admin user account, and you've patched all of your Microsoft AD servers to, the latest patches, which came out in March 2023's ones, basically. And if it's still working, that means you must be on 8110 and above, or 8040 take 158 and above. So if you're on these versions and AD query is still working, there is no urgency. If you're not on these versions, then I suspect it's already broken. But I'm assuming it's not already broken, because otherwise you would have already raised a support ticket with SPARC. So there is no urgency. However, having said that, to avoid these kind of problems in the future where something gets locked down and suddenly something else doesn't work in terms of from an architectural perspective, Checkpoint's recommendation is to move away from AD query as a feature and instead use the identity collector application.
Indeed, thank you very much. One last minute question, if you don't mind, Jay,
Yep.
from Wayne, is that will you be covering threat prevention policies? Are they an agenda item, or
there
not particularly?
Isn't. I'm going to touch upon one of the new features from 8120 that came out, which is one of the new additional software blades in threat prevention, but I'm not covering off threat prevention policies per se. However, if that's something that is of interest, I can arrange a half-an-hour session with one of my consultants or even myself, and we can go through that separately.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I reiterate that. Thank you very much, Jay. Wonderful.
What I'd like to do now is go through basically the new features that have come out from 8120. Now, obviously, there's far too many to cover off in a session, so I'm just going to focus on some of the key ones, which I think is definitely worth thinking about if you're not already aware of these. So I'm going to start off with a new security blade introduced in 8120 called Zero Phishing. And as the name suggests, it prevents phishing attacks from websites, both known and unknown. Usually, protections against phishing attacks are provided either by an endpoint protection, which, by the way, Checkpoint Endpoint Harmony solution does provide, or email solutions. Now with 8120, you can extend that protection to your network gateway, which means it is browser and platform agnostic. So it uses, so you can see here, if you're using custom threat prevention, then you have to make sure you enable it. If you use autonomous threat prevention, it will automatically be enabled, provided you have the licensed blade in your contract. Okay, and this is again where those automatic download feature is useful, because if you have that and you purchase the Zero Phishing blade or the threat protection bundle, and you have autonomous threat prevention, nothing for you to do. It will just be enabled and will start working. Okay. So anyway, coming back to the blade, so it uses two main engines. So there's a real-time phishing prevention based on URLs. So it analyzes various features within the URL in real time. So things like brand similarity, non-ASCII characters, time of registration. So it's always a bit risky to try and demo this functionality, because you don't know what's going to happen in terms of, you could end up with a nasty website on your screen, which isn't great for demos. So I did go through a few websites last night, and if I go across the logs and monitor, so what happens is there's, by the way, this website called phishing.at, and you can find newly updated phishing websites updated on there. So you can pick them, and I can go through those. So you can see I went through a couple last night, and these ones you can see were blocked by Zero Phishing. However, a lot of those websites I went through, and I even tried this morning to see if I could find something to demo this morning, but they'd already, even though they were kind of really new phishing sites, they'd already been picked up by Checkpoint's malware engine as something it already knew. So that was based off kind of your signature database, right? But these two last night that I went through, these were brand new, like even Checkpoint hadn't seen it, but he picked it up whilst scanning that specific website. So that's one part of the engine. The other part of that engine is in-browser zero phishing. So this is where it performs a JavaScript injection to scan the HTML forms when they're loaded onto the browser. So when the end user clicks on the input fields in the form, all of the HTML components are scanned in real time, and the information sent to the Checkpoint Zero Phishing Cloud service for analysis, which is kind of based on AI and machine learning stuff. So for this one, again, it's tricky to demo because if you already scan the website through zero phishing, it already knows that it's benign and it doesn't scan it. So this is one that I found last night. I've checked it. So assuming this works, you have to be quick because in terms of observing. So if I click on this field, you will see something pop up scanning. And that means it's scanning that field in real time. But like I said, I did this last night, it scanned it. So if it already knows it's benign, it might not kick in, but we'll find out. There you go, scanning. You saw that was just literally 2 seconds and it scanned it. Same width. So it's, as soon as you can see, I don't need to click on any others because as soon as I clicked on one, it scanned the whole HTML page and it knows it's benign, so it's fine. If you have the NGTX license bundle, that's the one that comes with threat extraction and threat emulation blades, then this blade is bundled in with that package. In terms of configuration, there really isn't much to do. If you're using, like I said, autonomous threat prevention, it's enabled automatically. If you're not, and if you're using the custom threat prevention, then you just need to make sure that you tick that blade. Now, there is a however with this one. So brilliant little security blades, you know, additional layer to protect your organization. However, more than 90% of the web traffic is HTTPS. So if you're not doing SSL inspection on your gateway, then you're not getting much value out of this blade, right? And you've heard me, for those who've been to these sessions before, I've talked about HTTPS inspection, the importance and how to go about deploying it, things to think about. Not one for this session, but if you are interested, then that's definitely something that we can help with. So that's zero phishing out with 8120, and if you have the NGTX license bundle already, then you already have this blade. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is an interesting little feature not many people are aware of. I have talked about this in the past as well. It's called IOC feeds, and IOC, or indicators of compromise. So even though Checkpoint Threat Intelligence is, you know, one of the most comprehensive threat intelligence repository out there, many customers still require a mechanism to import indicators of compromise threat intelligence from third-party sources. This could be your intelligence gathered from your own network by your SOC team. You know, it could be malicious IPs targeting your environment. It could be intelligence feed from other security providers, and I've got a couple here, so you'll see. Or it could be third-party feeds from industry-specific consortiums. So you've had the ability to kind of import these indicators prior to 8110 using management API. But what you can now do 8110 and 8120 onwards, which is quite cool, is you can create the indicator through Smart Console and point it to a URL feed. So if I open one of these, so you can see, so you do new IOC feed, but I've already got one here. So you point it to either a CSV feed or a sticks XML file. Okay, so you create a new indicator, set the action. You select based on the format of the file. You select, you know, like I said, CSV or sticks. What's the data type? So it could be any of these different data types. I've gone for something simple, which is an IP address. By the way, to show you what this looks like, I think I have this open already. There you go. So that's the list that I've imported. It's a CSV file. So you provide, so in this instance, the data type is IP address. Where's the actual data? So you can go back here and I can see first column, which is separated by the comma, and then the second column is the IP. Okay, so I'm just basically stating it's column 2. The delimiter is comma. What lines do you want to ignore? And that's it, right? So once you set this, you click on test feed. And what that then does is it allows you to select the gateway. I've only got a single gateway, and you hit test feed. Okay, so you can see it does 2 checks. It makes sure they can actually reach the URL and it can pass the data properly. So in this case, you can see it's imported 29 objects. Once you've done this and you've pushed a policy, that's literally it. From that point onwards, any traffic to or from any of those IP addresses will be blocked by the gateway. Similarly, this one here, for example, this is slightly different. This one is a URL based. So if I copy that, I think actually I can't. I think that one's a URL. But anyway, so this one's URL, different data column, and again, any access to any of these URLs will be blocked as well. So to show you a quick test, if I go, bear with, sorry, so if I copy an IP address here, copy the IP, and head to my VM, and there you go, that's already there, tested one this morning, so you can see that's failed. And if I go across to my Smart console here and head to logs and monitors, to logs, so the one for threat prevention, and you can see that one there is IP reputation, right? And it will tell you that its indicator name is the IP block list. Okay, so really useful feature. You know, all about layers, and if you have so for this one you do need so bear with, going here, you can see this is part of the antivirus engine, so you just need to make sure that you have the antivirus software blade as a subscription, and provided you have that, you can have, you know, loads of different IOC feeds being protected on your gateway in real time. And like I said, you just need to push it once. The frequency with which it goes and fetches this is, by the way, manage settings, blades, and threat prevention, external feed. So you can see it will check that feed every 5 minutes. So you can go and change it depending on how frequently you wanted to pull that information. Okay, but basically automated. You push policy once and you're protected against whatever IP addresses or URLs that are published within that feed. And this doesn't have to be, like I said, industry format. You can create your own feed and publish this as well. Moving on, another similar feature, which I think is really interesting. So this one, IOC, is, you know, you need the antivirus blade. The other feature that came out with 8120 is called network feeds object. Okay, and that object lets you enforce access based on feeds located on a HTTP or a HTTPS server. Okay, so I'll go through a network feed that I've created so I can talk you through this feature. So if I go across network object, network feeds, so that's the one I've created here. And I should have it open here somewhere. So that's my, it's basically a Ubuntu server with a flat file. Okay, and I'm using that in this this rule here, right? So devnet across to app team, just for the purposes of testing. I've got FTP on here. So the way this works, quite similar. So when you create the feed, you point to the HTTPS server that is hosting this feed, and it must be written in either JSON format or as a flat file. To keep things simple, I've created a flat file, and if I go across here and do VI network feed, so there you go, that's my list there, right? So what I'm going to do is if I show you, so if I go across to this VM here, and before I talk about this, I'm going to try and connect to this FTP server. Okay, just going to copy that. You can see that's clearly not working. Okay, I'm going to move across back to this, and I'm going to add. Once this moves across to insert mode, come on, there you go. Right, so add that queue out. Now, so we've tested this. We saw that it didn't work. So come back here. So very similar to the IRC feed, right? What's the data type? It's an IP address. What's the delimiter? It's a new line. What lines are we ignoring? Prefix, hash. Test the feed and click on test feed. And you can already see, so initially we checked there were just 4 IPs. If I do cat now feed, right, so it's 1 2 3 4 5, so you can see it's already picked up the 5th IP address now. And if I hover my cursor on this little eye, I can see what those IP addresses are. Now, if I go to advanced, so with this one, by the way, you can specify the feed interval here itself, as opposed to, you know, with the IOC feeds where it was in managing settings and blades and threat prevention. So because I'm still testing this, I've got this set to 1 minute, so it's quite quick. But anyway, so if I go now to my VM here, if I hit on new tab and log in, there you go. Right, so that's now worked without me having to push a policy. Right, so really, really interesting, really powerful feature. Where this feature is, by the way, before I talk about where you can use this, you can use this in access control, so which is what I'm using here. HTTPS inspection. You can even use it in the NAT policy, and it can be used in either source or destination. Where this is really useful from a business case point I can think of is where you want the file policy to be updated dynamically for certain parts of the business without the need for the usual change approval and the policy push processes. So if you have one administrator who creates the rule base and defines the object, and another administrator manages the rule base, manages the content of those rule base. So for example, network admin can give the DevOps team lead access to this file. That DevOps team lead can give, can independently manage their lab to shorten basically the delivery times. So you can then create an inline, dedicated inline layer specifically to DevOps, and you can really outsource this and put the guardrails so that nothing, you know, they can't navigate away from what they should be able to access, and you can have other rules above that as well to lock it down. But basically, really useful feature. You don't have to push policies. And another neat thing is because it's part of kind of the management gateway functionality, you don't need any additional licenses. So if you can be a bit clever, and if you wanted to do kind of the IOC stuff, but you don't have the AV blade, you can find a way to publish that list in a format, which is either JSON or a flat file. And in that case, you can use your network feed to block access to those IP addresses or whatever those resources are, right? So it can be IP address, domain, or IP address and a mix of domain as well. Okay, so that's network feed available from 8120. Obviously, because this is kind of being enforced on the gateway, it's not just a management feature, right? You have to make sure the management is on 8120 and the gateway is also on 8120. Right, moving on, smart workflow. So with R81, Checkpoint introduced the ability to view changes within a session in a way that's much more presentable than before, and you can show comparisons between published sessions. If I go to Management Settings, Sessions, and click on Revisions, I've got one here, 10. So if you can select any given session, actions, changes, compare with previous list, and it will create a change report, which basically lists, what new access rules were created, what was edited, what new objects were created, and it lists it in a presentable format that's easy to read. And you could even print it to a PDF from 8110. So 81, they came out with this feature, but you couldn't print it, you couldn't PDF it, none of that. But with 8110, they released that. And now with 8120, what Checkpoint have introduced is policy change review and approval cycle, also known as smart workflow. So if anyone remembers that, this originally came out in 2009 with R70.10. It died a horrible death back then. Wasn't a great feature back then. It was separate, it was an additional license. You had to pay for that. This, on the other hand, what I'm about to show you is a feature that's included within the management server, right? So as long as you're on 8120, just the management server, nothing to do with the gateways, then you can use this functionality. So the way this works is you have to create two permissions profile, okay? One that can approve the changes, which is the default super user profile, and another permission profile, which cannot publish changes without approval. So I've created one called Change Engineer. So go in here, and I believe it's management. So you untick this functionality, okay? So publish sessions without an approval. So you untick that and assign this to an administrator. So I've created an administrator here called Matt, and I've assigned him that permissions profile, Change Engineer. Okay, so if I now log in as Matt, let's see what the behavior is. 3. So what you'll see, the first thing is there isn't a publish section at the top. If you can see, all it has is submit request. So I'm going to make one minor change. So I'm just going to do some gibberish stuff here, just to prove point. So I've made a minor change, and you can see I can't publish it. I have to submit a request. So I'm going to submit request, do a submit. And what you'll see is as soon as you submit it, that change that I've just made here disappears, and there's a lock here. If I go across to this other gateway, this other session, you can see that rule is logged. I'm thinking, that's a bit strange. I thought that was a bug, but actually it isn't, because that change hasn't yet been approved by the administrator. It still doesn't exist, right? So hence it gets it basically disappears. Same with if you create a new object. If you create a new object and you submit request, the object disappears from the gateway until it's been approved. So if I go across to where are my Matt sessions? So I go across to the admin. You can see I've got a notification here. So I can go to sessions, view sessions, and I can see I have one which is pending approval. I can right click on that and click on view review change report. By the way, we don't have to do this. This is only for the purposes of demo. There's much more elegant ways of notifying the administrator of when a change has been submitted, and I'll come through that in a second. But there you go. So I can see what the change is. If I click on edit, I can see that rule name has been changed from management rule to that gibberish. Now I can, at this point, approve, reject. If I reject it, Matt will get notified that I've rejected the change, but the change is still there kind of within that bubble. And he can then open that session, fix the change, and then submit it again. In this instance, I'm just going to approve this. Okay, it's approve. And then what you'll see is if I go to Matt's session, that is now visible. Okay, and I can now basically install a policy and publish that change. I talked about notification. So what you can do is, if I close that, is something called smart tasks. Okay, so this is again something that's new with 8120 as well. Well, it's been there since 81, but with 8120, you now have the ability to notify all of these different tasks at different trigger points. So after submit, after reject, after publish, after approve. So if I open this one, which is what Matt did. So what we can do is after submit, send email, use you'll have to provide your SMTP server, and then this is the interesting bit, is you can say attachment, create a change report. So this way, when the administrator gets notified of the change that the change engine has made, it's not just a notification within Smart Console. That will happen anyway, but it will be a much more presentable format with a PDF explaining what change that administrator made. They can review that, file it away for that specific change request, and then either approve it or reject it. Okay, so that's out with 8120. Like I said, this is a management only feature, and what that means is you don't need gateways to be on 8120 to be able to start using this, and it's bundled in, so it's not an additional software blade that you need to purchase. So smart workflow available with 8120. So moving on to the next one, which is briefly mentioned this SAML authentication for Smart Console. So this came out with 8120. So you can now use SAML authentication to log into your Smart Console. So your administrators don't need to remember yet another password. They can basically log in using single sign-on with their AD credentials. So the way this works, conscious of time, I will quickly show you users and identities, identity provider. So with 8120, there's now a new radio button called Managing Administrator Access. So you create a new identity provider, select Managing Administrator Access. As soon as you do that, it will provide you with your identifier, entity ID, and reply URL. Okay, you head to your Azure AD environment, you create a new enterprise application, which I have already created here. And then you go to single sign-on and you paste those entity ID and the reply URL here, okay? There's a few other things that you need to do, which is you need to create 2 new claims. So one, which is a group claim, and it needs to be all groups. Source attribute needs to be group ID, and you need to customize the name of the group claim and call it groups, okay? And then the other one is another claim called username, where the source attribute is user principal name. Okay, you have to make sure that you do these 2 additional claims. Once you've created those 2, this is a new one. I've been doing SAML for a while now on different applications, but I've never had to do this. But basically, by default, the signing option is sign SAML assertion. You need to go and change that to sign SAML response and assertion for when it comes to Smart Console. So create 2 new claims. Make sure you've changed the SAML to assertion and response, and then go to users and groups and provide the group of users that you want to be able to authenticate against, use single sign-on to log into your Smart Console, okay? And then you head back to, where's single sign-on, and you download your federation metadata XML file. Okay. Once you've done that, you import that in, and that's your job done here within the identity provider. There's a few additional steps that we need to also do, but before we do that, I'm just going to sign in to the Smart Console to show you what the behavior looks like. So I'm at the moment logged into a Windows VM where I'm logged in with my Azure AD user, and I'm going to log in. So what you do is you hit that drop down, and instead of username, you select identity provider. Okay, and do that and log in with single sign-on. What you'll see is it will redirect to the login page. So there will be a pop-up, there you go, and then it will start logging in. So whilst it's doing that, move across here. So what you do is you create, sorry, where am I? This one is, yeah, admin. So go away. So you create a new permission profile called, sorry, not permission profile, you create an administrator group. So new identity provider administrator group, which by the way, I have already created one here. And then this is the interesting piece, okay? So it doesn't understand the Azure group name. So what you have to do is you have to grab the group ID from Azure, which by the way, is if I go back to users and groups, click on that group, that's the object ID, right? So you copy that and you paste that in here, okay? And then assign the appropriate permission profile. Because my user is part of that group, you will see that user is now logged in. At the bottom, you can see it's a Dale V. So I'm now logged in. So I didn't have to put my credentials in. That was single sign-on, really simple. Okay, so that again, 8120 feature, just need to make sure that your management server is on 8120. Okay. Moving on to another really useful feature, which is Web Smart Console. Hopefully everyone's aware. So this came up with 81. Checkpoint initially released it, the Web Smart Console version, as a read-only version. So if I go across here, it was read-only, and with 8110 they released read-write functionality. Then again, later down the year, they released install policy functionality, and you can see, I mean, this is the SK here. Every month they keep adding more and more ability and functionality. Like, you know, September they added editors for time object time groups. Now you can add support for these objects. So the aim, you can see, is for them to move away 100% across to the Web Smart Console functionality. But at the moment, you could literally get away with doing 80% of what you do on a day-to-day basis within your gateway. You know, creating, editing, deleting objects, creating rules, all of that stuff using your Web Smart Consoles functionality. With 8120, what they have also done is you can now single sign on to your Web Smart Console. So if I hit log in, you can see that's literally instantaneous, as opposed to using the Smart Console. So go across security policies, all of my stuff, got my objects. Autonomous policy wasn't a thing before, a few months back. Now you can edit it as well. So if I click on deployment, I can modify the autonomous policy here as well, right? So again, these functionality with the Smart Console keeps being rolled out automatically, and you know, it's based on a Docker container, and that Docker container just gets updated without you even doing anything. So as long as you start using it on a day-to-day basis, you will find login one day and, oh, that wasn't there before, and functionality is there. So they're silently rolling out. But if you want to keep an eye on, it's this SK here. Right. Again, I'll make sure this is on the slide decks that we sent around at the end of the session. So that's Smart Console, much favorite feature as well. And, there's so many use cases. You can create a user, create a permissions profile where the user doesn't have access to anything except logs and monitor. And you can give that permission profile, set that to your NOC users or your SOC team. And they don't need to use the Smart Console as an application to log in to do any form of investigation. They could just use the browser to connect to the logs and just do their investigation, right? And the Web Smart Console is so much better in terms of when it comes to doing the investigation with logs, because you've got the stats on your left, you've got the log card on your right, and yeah, it's just so much easier to troubleshoot. That Smart Console, apologies that we're running over time, but I think we've got some time still. That's all I want to cover off from an 8120 perspective. I want to now start talking about a couple of questions. Sorry, there's a question, Michael Lenham. Shall we take that quickly before I move on to the two new products?
Yeah, so Gora has asked if MFA can be applied to log on with single sign-on.
Really good question. Yes, I would like to think it can. I can definitely test that in my lab, and I can come back to you. But I don't see why not. So basically, we can enable MFA, and yeah, absolutely. I honestly don't see why it won't work, but I can test it and send that out separately to you, Gora. Anything else before I move on?
I think that's it from the chat at the minute.
Okay,
yep.
cool.
No more questions.
Okay, cool. So what we'd like to do next is take you through a couple of really interesting products from within the Checkpoint Infinity Portal. For those who are unfamiliar with the Infinity Portal, this is Checkpoint's cloud native single security platform for all of their SaaS offerings. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Harmony Email and Collaboration. This is the one that Michael briefly touched upon in his intro slides. This is the acquisition Checkpoint made a company called Avanan. Before I talk you through the product, some really high-level salient points. Typically email security solutions will have login, and there's loads of tick boxes and configuration to be managed, and usually there's a bit of an overhead in managing a SEG. HEC, on the other hand, is based on machine learning, so a lot of the features are automated. It is also API based, so it can provide both post-delivery protection, and it has a patented AI technology that blocks the threats before they reach the end user's inbox. So effectively, it runs as a last layer of defense to eliminate, what the default security or the existing layers miss. Being API based, there's no MX record changes to do, so there's no downtime. If you want to trial it, it's really simple. It protects you not just against email threats, so it can do the whole business comms suite. So Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, even Google Drive, Slack, Dropbox, Box, and there's a few others as well, which I've probably missed. It can now also offer archiving, which they couldn't before, but now with the acquisition, they can. Setup, like I said, it literally takes 10 minutes. And once you finish configuring it, it begins in monitoring mode. So it sits there silently. So trial is really easy to deploy and zero impact. And as soon as it's set up, I think this is really interesting because it forms 2 weeks of analysis of your email bodies, attachments, and beyond those 2 weeks, it also gathers metadata for over a year. So things like it goes and understands what the email com behavior is, the login information, and it starts building a picture of so that it can alert on anything that it sees as anonymous. Everything that the solution scans for is shown here on the dashboard. So phishing, malware, anomalies, DLP, shadow IT. Under Shadow IT, we have this lovely graph login map that tells you who's logging into your system. Where it becomes really powerful is if we do this based on not just successful events, but everything. So failed and successful. And this is where you start having a picture formed where you see a ton of failed login from North America and a few successful login in the UK, and there's some form of brute force attack happening. With Shadow IT, you get visibility to any SaaS applications that your users are using that's outside of the company's purview. So the way it does this, by the way, is because it's email aware. If it sees emails that your users are getting for, say, for example, in this instance, Dropbox, that's how it flags it. And then what you can do, by the way, is you can acknowledge this as I approve this app because it's approved by the organization, or you decide not to approve it and you flag this as a user education. So that's Shadow IT, that's DLP. Anomaly stuff is really interesting. So this is the engine that detects behaviors and actions that seem abnormal when observed in the context of an organization and a user's historical activity. So, it knows people go on holiday, they interact with VPNs, people pop up in regions where it doesn't expect them to. So, if I happen to go to holiday in Spain and log in from Spain for the first time, it will create a geographic event. But if I then start forwarding emails to my Gmail or Yahoo, then that is scored as a much more critical event. And all of this behavioral analysis done using machine learning, and it's based on profiles that it starts building upon historical events. And this is really powerful because anomalies are often a sign that an account is compromised. If I look at phishing, so if I click on phishing, it takes us to the events page, and you can see everything's broken down based on delivery status, type, categories. So lots of filters available as well for your day-to-day BAU troubleshooting functionality. I do have a few events cherry-picked that I want to pick on, so I'm going to go to Mail Explorer and change that to one year, just so that I can pick stuff. I'm going to go to subject, impersonation, search. So once this comes back, if I pick on that, so what you can see with this one, for example, so this one here is a suspected impersonation. Now we can see the security stack. So you can see, you can even see the enforcement flow. So Microsoft Defender saw it as clean, decided to deliver to inbox. Checkpoint picked it up as suspected phishing. It's done its analysis, it's safe, and hence it's decided to deliver to the inbox. If I go further down, relationship strength, really interesting because it analyzes historical email volume, not just between the user to user, but also between the two domains as well, right? And if you go further down, we have the email transport chain. So this will show you where the email originated from, came from a VPN exit, where it came from outside the country, especially if it's an impersonation email. That's going to make it it will help make it really obvious to the administrator. If I pick another one, so if I go to subject, is it link, and sender email is git h govtf.xy. That's it. It's just, by the way, a domain that allows you to test your email security solution. So that's what I've used here. So click on that one here. So this is another classic one where Microsoft Defender rightly saw it as spam, but Checkpoint did some more analysis on it, and it's picked it up as phishing. So the enforcement flow, you can see Microsoft picked up as spam, it would have delivered it to junk. Checkpoint picked it up, saw it as phishing, and just quarantined it. So it's not even ended up in the user's junk mailbox. If we scroll down to the link analysis, this is really interesting. So if I click on Analyze Link, This is where I can get a secure preview of the link. So Checkpoint extracts the link and opens it in a sandbox and shows you a rendering so you can see it safely. I can also do the same with that specific zip file. Obviously, because it's a zip, I can't get a preview of the link, but it will at least show me, insight into why it's seen as a suspicious link. So, the amount of traffic, which is really low, reputation's low, it's malicious, and it's been picked up by the smart neural reputation. Lastly, I do subject, sender is Manning. If I search that, we should get an email. So this one's interesting, right? So what we did with this one is we downloaded, I say we, our Checkpoint SE helped me with this, downloaded a malicious software or malware from GitHub, repackaged it so it wouldn't be caught by standard signature-based AV, and we then further changed the extension to be a PDF, and we then sent this as an attachment. So because of all of that obfuscation, Microsoft Defender saw that file as clean. Checkpoint then picked it up, and it has then seen it as malicious, and it's blocked it. So you can see Microsoft delivered to inbox, Checkpoint picked up as quarantine. If I click on that file, I get more information. And if I click on view report, I can see a detailed threat report for that file. Okay, so it will tell me exactly what that file did, what the different hash files are, all of the different files that it then dropped when that PDF was clicked upon. So these are all of the dropped files. It matches against the MITRE framework, all of the different suspicious activity, and you can even look at the emulation video. Okay, so really, really powerful functionality. So a better view of seeing what's allowed through your email platform and caught by Checkpoint dashboard is if I head back to overview and I change from login events to email security flow. What you'll see here is you can see 93 emails came into Microsoft. Of that, Microsoft Defender decided to deliver 41 to inbox, 29 were delivered to junk, and 23 were quarantined by Microsoft itself, right? Of those 29 that were delivered to junk, you can see Checkpoint decided they were all malicious and it's quarantined them. So ended up with only 41 emails being actually delivered to the user's accounts, right? So really visually a clean way of seeing how the enforcement flow works. Moving on to policy, so really simple. So you can see I've got different policies for Office 365, Mail, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. If I click on the email threat prevention policy, I think I mentioned this earlier. You obviously prevent is something that's patented with the Checkpoint AI technology. This is where it can stop the emails landing into the user's inbox. It can also do detect and remediate, so effectively allows the email to flow through, and if the email is deemed malicious in the background, Checkpoint will then pull that email back. So if you don't want any latency, by the way, latency is less than 10 seconds with prevent, but if you don't want any latency, you can choose to opt to detect and remediate. Scope is really simple. These are all of the different workflows of what action needs to happen. Anything that you see with star is what Checkpoint recommends. So it's really easy in terms of the managing day-to-day. Password protected attachments is the one that's slightly different. So this is where if I go across to this user here, and if I go to, where's Outlook? That one here. Oh, I've lost it now. Thought I had it somewhere. Hang on, sorry. No, not here. I think it's too many windows open, too many windows open. There you go. So if I click on this, you can see that's an attachment that had password protection, which Checkpoint can't scan. So it prompts you for a password, you can provide the password, and at that point, it doesn't store the password, by the way, it just uses it to open the file, scan it, and provided it's benign, this email here will disappear and it will be replaced with the original email with the attachment. It also does URL rewrite. So basically you can see if I hover across, it says protected by Checkpoint. And if you look at the bottom, it says checkpoint-urlprotection.com. So it does the analysis on that. And you can see that's a malicious URL, which I sent for the purpose of testing, and that's been blocked. So it can do that functionality as well. So yeah, really simple in terms of the policy, the OneDrive policy, SharePoint, Teams. The only major difference there is you cannot do the inline protection because of the nature of that technology. So that's it. That's all detect and remediate. Okay, but email you can do inline as well. Mail Explorer we've already looked through, and analytics is really useful, gives you kind of an exec summary of how things are and allows you to drill down and do further analysis. But yeah, that's conscious of time, kind of slightly overrun. So that's Checkpoint Harmony Event Collaboration. As Michael mentioned earlier, this is growing rapidly in terms of one of the fastest growing products within Checkpoint's Harmony stack, and we're seeing a lot of traction with this. So doing a POC trial is really, really easy, simple, takes less than 10 minutes to set it up, and yeah, we can help you guys with this. The other product, and I'll quickly rattle through that, that I want to show is actually a feature within Checkpoint Harmony Endpoint. So most of you are probably familiar with Checkpoint Harmony Endpoint. This is, Checkpoint's endpoint solution, and Checkpoint have always been about consolidating point solutions into a single product. Take Endpoint, for example. You've got single agent for VPN, sandboxing, web protection, access control, anti-ransomware, anti-bot. The list goes on. They have continued to build upon this by adding vulnerability management and patch management with the latest version of Harmony Endpoint. It's an additional add-on, so you have to purchase it as a separate feature, but provided you do, and the license, the feature is licensed, then you simply enable it through the policy. And once you've enabled it, this is the kind of visibility that you get from your entire estate, right? So you can start seeing vulnerabilities by severity, top 5 risky apps, which are the most vulnerable devices. And because this is Checkpoint Endpoint, the enforcement, there's different ways you can enforce. So we can do manual or automated patching using the same endpoint client, or we can also do things like block the device from the network, provided you have the firewall enabled from the Checkpoint Endpoint client. But we can basically, so I can see this is the views devices. I can switch across to vulnerabilities, and I can view all of the vulnerabilities that it's picked up, and I can see, how many devices affected. Neat little thing is you can group by application. So rather than looking at individual vulnerabilities, you can group by application and then decide what you want to do based on those applications. So you can see Chrome, for example, 54 CVEs and all the different devices. You simply select on a device and you can patch, or you can even isolate that device. And when you isolate the device, the only connections allowed to from that device is DNS, DHCP, and comms out to the actual management server. So you can de-isolate the device if you need to. Policy is really simple. So by the way, they're using Ivanti in the back end. They've been around, a couple of the market leaders in vulnerability management, patch management. So they use that technology in the back end. And yeah, really simple to implement. And they've had some really interesting success stories with the deployments that they've done as well. But literally, there's not much to show other than this lovely chart, and you can see, lots of different ways to filter and lots of different ways that you can action. What I really like about this is the fact that it breaks it down based on risky apps, most vulnerable devices. I mean, this device here has 811 vulnerabilities, so you can focus on that specific device if you wanted to. right? So you'd simply tick on that and patch. So that's vulnerability management, and that's out with the with Harmony Endpoint. That went GA about a few months ago, but it's been running in customer EA environments for over a year now. So it is, I'd like to say it's still a mature product, even though it's only been released a few months in. And I think that's it from me. Any questions? I haven't been keeping an eye on chat. Giuseppe, Michael, anything that I need to answer?
Nothing particular, Jane. Nothing to raise for the questions. Thank you.
Okay. So if nothing further, I just want to suppose end by just saying thank you very much for joining us this morning. I hope that was useful. Even if there's one little thing that you found useful and say, oh, I didn't know about that, that's my job done. If you guys could please take a minute to fill out the feedback forms, which we'll be sending out later, that would be very much appreciated. And hopefully next year we will do this in person. So it'd be great to see you guys in person. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.